Hi, welcome to another weekly episode of Start the Week with Wisdom. I'm your host, Bridget Burns, Executive Director of the University Innovation Alliance.
And I'm Doug Lederman, editor and co-founder of Inside Higher Ed.
Each week, I team up with a journalist to have a conversation with a sitting college president or chancellor to try and unpack what it's like to lead in this moment and distill some wisdom for you in the week ahead. And Doug, as usual, you're always that journalist, actually. So you're the guy. That's why we call it Start the Week with Wisdom.
Today, we're joined by one of the more interesting recent presidents to join the ranks of higher education in the last while. Nicole Hurd is the president of Lafayette College. Before that, she was the founder and CEO of the College Advising Corps. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you. It's great to be with both of you.
Well, we're so excited to be able to spend some time with you and longtime friend, and so excited for this new chapter, and wanted to be able to create space for folks who are thinking about changing sectors, but also I think you have such a unique perspective, having been being an icon in the nonprofit space, and now moving into presidential leadership. So I'm really hoping that today you can give us a sense of what the difference is like for you and the things that have been most surprising. So I guess we would start off with just how you're doing right now, and could you give us a sense of, are you guys in person, or how are you?
Well, thank you, Bridget. I'm great. I will say, after going through the last several months in a pandemic, it's great to be back on a college campus. We are here. We're in person. I'm happy to report we have not had a COVID case on campus in about 6 weeks now. So we had a little spike in early September when we all got back together. But we're doing well now. I think, as you know, it is so important for us to see and hear and value each other and be together. And so one of the things I love about being on a college campus right now is, whether it's faculty, staff, or students, there's this sense of recommitting to each other, and there's a sense of belonging to each other, and there's a sense of, we've gone through something hard, so now do we take the lessons learned and build back in ways that lift more people up and include more and allow us to really shine. So it's actually a really exciting time to be on a college campus.
That's wonderful. Well, I guess, can we just start off in terms of going from College Advising Corps to the president of a very established, top private liberal arts college? Can you talk to us about what has been so different for you? What has struck you the most?
So, those of you who've spent some time around me, I spent 15 years in the college access space I love, space that I'm still very much a part of in cheerleading. I also, before that, had spent a lot of time on college campuses. I started my career at the University of Virginia, spent some time at UNC Chapel Hill. And so, when the opportunity came to come back to a campus was presented to do this full time, I had to jump, because the reason why I started the College Advising Corps and did all that great work with amazing colleagues was really around being around students, right? It was about increasing opportunity. And while the work is and continues to be so impactful, I think I was in a place with my own journey where I wanted to have those deep relationships again. So, I think one of the things I would challenge us in the nonprofit sector to think about is, there's so much pressure, and Bridget, you and I both know this because we've been road warriors before, and you still are. So much pressure to fundraise, so much pressure to scale, so much time thinking about breadth. And I think I was at a point in my journey where College Advising Corps was doing really well. My colleagues were ready to fly without me, and I was yearning that depth. I was yearning knowing students' names. I was yearning being around faculty and their research. I was yearning around being a staff that was supporting a place in a beautiful way. And so I think, to me, the first 15 years of this journey were really about scale and impact. And now I'm thinking about really depth and impact. And, I'll be a little feisty for a second and say, for those of us in the liberal arts sector, we can't yield the space that college access is only for gigantic schools, right? We can't say that you can't be transformative if you're small. You actually can be incredibly transformative at this scale. And so, again, I think after doing a lot of breadth, it was time to do depth, and it was time to prove to the world you can change the world from Easton, Pennsylvania, which is what we're doing every day here. So.
Yeah, a lot of different directions we can go in there. I want to maybe come back to your personal journey in a minute, but in terms of the sort of type of institution you're at now, talk to us a little bit about sort of what you see as, there's talk about private liberal arts colleges being on the decline. There's talk about them not being relevant because they don't historically serve tons of students that we recognize in higher education most need to be served better. Talk why this place, why this sector.
Yeah, so I think it goes back to, and again, I know this will be a little bit controversial to some people, but I do believe in relationships, right? I don't believe in transactions. I believe in relationships. And I believe, and this was true in the College of Isaac-Corrins, and it's true on this campus, we have to have the space and the time to see and hear and value each other. And we need to be intentional, and we need to do the work together. And I would say the liberal arts space is underrepresented space in the college access world, right? We do have a lot of underrepresented first gen and low income students going to our campuses. We need to get more. But when they do get here, look at the graduation rates, right? They're high. Look at the impact that we have in terms of connecting to faculty. Our faculty to student ratio is 10-1 on this campus. One of the things I love to see is how that interaction happens. I'll tell you, my first 4.5 months on this campus, one of my favorite things to do is go to class, not to judge or evaluate, but to watch the magic. My hope is that every student in the country would have that magic happen. And I know it's happening on this campus because I've seen it with my own 2 eyes. So I would challenge us, as somebody that spent 15 years in the nonprofit connected to the higher ed space, and I've said this to both of you before, we do not celebrate the diversity in a higher ed sector the way we should. There's actually a great diversity in our higher ed sector, and there's not just one place for everybody. And I'm here to say, wait a second, as we think about scale and we think about impact and we think about protecting our democracy, liberal arts colleges have a huge piece of that, not just because we do educate thousands of students, but because our students go out and graduate and change the world in really important ways. So again, I'm a little feisty about this. We're not going to yield the space. We're going to join hands with our bigger friends and with our community colleges and really make sure that this American higher ed tapestry is working for all students. Liberal arts colleges have to be part of that tapestry.
So I'm curious about what you think in terms of there's a pretty persistent drumbeat about the fate and future of private liberal arts colleges. And obviously when you were making the decision about coming to Lafayette, you had to think about the future and what those trends are, what is real, what is perhaps hype. And I'm just curious about when folks ask you about what you see as the future, how do you talk about it in terms of this entire sector that has been treated as though it's a monolith and treated as though it's a dinosaur, which it is not. But I do think there's been some wide sweeping generalizations. I'm curious about how you rebut those.
So, I mean, you just did it for me, Bridget, right? It's not a monolith and it's not a dinosaur. So again, there's a lot of diversity even within the liberal arts college sector, right? So we're not all the same. And what I do love about all of us, and look, there's a number of us here in Pennsylvania, when you put us together, we're a mighty engine, right? So again, I think it's, if you look at us as kind of one school at a time, you'd say, well, these are small schools. What's the impact? If you start aggregating us together, we're serving a lot of students. And like I said, I'm really passionate about the fact that I know students' names on this campus, right? As the president, I've been going and showing up in all sorts of places that matter, right? I've been going from everything to, our arts campus and showing up for our students who are in the arts to, I've been to every volleyball game and football game and field hockey game that I can get to, been showing up, in the library space, showing up in the classrooms. And so again, if you want to make sure that you have an education where you have engagement, this is incredibly important space. And I'm watching students thrive, especially coming after a pandemic, thrive in ways because they have that connection to each other and they have their connection to that faculty. And I'm watching a staff show up every day to make sure that we can take care of each other. So again, I think in a world where we say or too much, what I love about this campus is we're intentionally saying and, right? So it's not liberal arts or engineering on this campus. It's actually liberal arts and engineering. We have an engineering division. It's not academics or athletics on this campus. It's academics and athletics on this campus. And again, I think we can be a beacon. I said this in my inauguration, we're on a hill here. This college on a hill needs to shine more. We need to show everybody you can do and not or in a world that desperately wants all of us to say or right now.
So there was, it's not very long ago that I think it was quite legitimate to question whether the sector you're talking about was committed to to diversity, to low-income students, and there's been a lot of activity in the last few years. Some of it from within, some of it through external pressure, like the Chetty data that really shined a light on institutions that didn't enroll many students from lower socioeconomic quintiles, et cetera. And we've seen initiatives like the American Talent Initiative and others sort of crop up. Do you think, how do you see that moving? Do you think the external pressure has been helpful? Do you, if sometimes uncomfortable, do you think that, are you seeing sort of acknowledgement and commitment from the institutions that they need to do better?
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing about that question, Doug, is I was one of those, and I still am one of those constructive irritants, right? And I'm happy to be a constructive irritant. If you're not making some people uncomfortable, then you aren't growing, right? And so I would say this: the American Talent Initiative, other initiatives, yes, I think accountability is important, and this sector needed more accountability in terms of how we were supporting first generation low income and underrepresented students. That being said, I also love the fact, and I think a lot of people saw this, being that constructive irritant and now being on the other side in terms of actually helping to lead an institution like this one. We announced, I guess, about 10 days ago that we were getting rid of the CSS profile for any student in a high school that's 75% free reduced lunch or more. That is squarely from my constructive irritant days, and that's squarely from spending all that time in the college access space, knowing that we don't, in the admission space, especially in the liberal arts admission space, or the highly selective admission space where they use the CSS profile, we have to stop making low-income students prove they're low-income over and over and over again. It's demoralizing, it's demeaning. I would say it actually adds to an imposter syndrome before a student even gets to a campus, because we've proven over and over again, we don't trust you, keep verifying that you're low-income. And so I think what I love about being in this space is I'm bringing the frame of being one of those constructive irritants now to being into a place where my peers and I can have these conversations, and I can actually do something about it in a way that I couldn't do about it when I was in the nonprofit side. So, I do think, and that's just one example of where, some people will say, well, it's just the CSS profile. It's a small form. It's not a small form. It's actually a real barrier. But what I think the lens I love about it is, where else are we asking people to keep proving something that we can prove by aggregate data? We can prove it by a high school. And where do we start showing up where we say, no, the college journey, and you all know this, doesn't start when we move in, and it's not for 4 years, right? The college journey starts, and this is back to the College Advising Corps, 9th grade, 10th grade, first time you talk to a college rep, first time you get on a website, first time you look at a financial aid form. It starts way before you ever step foot on a campus, right? So again, I think, yes, there's been progress in the liberal arts space, but as places that care about relationships, I'm going to keep questioning, how are we showing up in the high school space? And then what we do really well, but we can always do better, is then how do we support after the college space? Because again, it's not about the 4 years, it's about the journey. And how do we think about our alumni? How do we think about first job, second job? How do we think about, this goes back to me being a pretty feisty, big thinking person. Our impact's not just the 2,700 students that we have on this campus. Our impact is what they're going to do when they're done, and how do we support them after their time at Lafayette? So again, I'm trying to ask us, let's think about the journey and not just the 4 years.
I loved that change, and that was part of why I reached out to you. Is I saw that I saw the article about the CSS profile, and so I was just like, man, she's back, she's up to it again. Didn't matter where she is, she's going to do it. I love it. I am curious about how other leaders can follow this lead. How can you talk through, for those who don't know what the CSS profile, perhaps add a bit more color, but mainly how can you see others who want to replicate this work? You obviously have a depth of understanding in this space that is unusual for a president. And so if other presidents want to mimic that effort, what kind of email do they need to send, and to whom? And what do you see as the net result for that?
So the CSS profile, just to give everybody a little bit of a deeper dive, is a supplemental. So you've already filled out your FAFSA. This is now another form. And it's used mostly by highly selective schools and liberal arts colleges as another layer of information so we can make good decisions, right? Now, the reality is we don't need it for a lot of different populations. And, we'll see if we need it at all. I'm going to test that. But for low-income students, we don't need it. So again, why are we asking people to keep verifying their income status when we already know that their income status is at the low end of our economic bands, right? So it was really a decision made out of who are we as a culture? Who are we trying to be? How are we showing up? And what barriers are we putting up? And so what I'd say to my fellow college presidents is, first of all, you need to talk to your admissions and financial aid office and just see, do you really need this data or not? Again, you both know this. There's a lot of data that we have at an aggregate level that a family would never have to go through this if we would just use some different data sets, right? A family would never have to go through this. Again, I'm really kind of getting excited about thinking about the high school as the unit of measure instead of the individual student, take the pressure off the family for not having to fill out those forms. But I also say, again, I think it's a culture issue. And how can we say across the higher ed spectrum, including, our schools that are much bigger than us, how are we showing up for our students? And what are we asking them to verify? And how are we saying to them, you are part of this community? Again, I'm a big believer community starts before they get on campus. And so again, those interactions matter. And whether we say to students, we want you here, you're going to be part of this family. Students and families are smart. If you don't call them family until they get on campus, they know it. And if you keep asking them to verify things and you keep flagging them for all sorts of compliance, then they know they're not family. And again, back to, I'm not a believer in transaction. I'm a believer in relationships. How do we make sure we're extending relationships as we enter the higher ed space?
Right.
Yeah, go ahead, Bridget. You want to keep going?
Well, I guess the last question on like broader topics, I'm curious if there are any things that if you look at the broader sector that we talk about a lot of the same stuff. I'm curious about what you think higher ed should be spending more energy talking about that they do not right now, or if there's something we need to focus on more.
Well, I mean, Bridget, this is a lot of the work that you're doing so beautifully, right? I think back to making sure that we see and hear and value our students. And so, whether it's thinking about the high school space and how we support our school counselors, our families, our students, and wonderful people like college advice and core advisors, make sure that every student has a post-secondary path. We're not done yet. We're not even close to being done. We still have so much work to do on the access side. And then the success side, right? This is the work that you do so beautifully, Bridget. It's about, what is the experience once you get here? And again, I think why I was so attracted to Lafayette is I could see as I was kind of falling in love with this campus through Zoom interviews, which you can imagine how interesting it was to go through a presidential search by Zoom. But falling in love with this campus on Zoom starting last spring, and then coming to the campus and now being on it and living on it every day, I fall more and more in love with this place every day. But it's also about making sure that we're supporting our students, our faculty and staff in ways that lift them all up. And that's an ongoing challenge. And we have to have both. And these, you all who know me, these are my kind of favorite words. It's around grace and humility and really listening and being in community. It's also around accountability, right? And how do we measure and how do we make sure that we actually do what we say we're going to do and that we stop doing things that don't work and scale things that do. And that humility, that constant belief in improvement is something that I brought with me and something that I think I'm excited to watch the Lafayette journey continue to improve and strengthen as we commit to that kind of work together.
So pivoting back to sort of your personal journey, as you called it before, it'd be pretty easy and really mistaken to sort of tag you as a non-traditional president. Even though you've spent 15 years outside the confines of the industry itself, but you have some experience, and calling presidents non-traditional can be tricky because it carries some baggage in certain ways. So, but I guess I'm interested in that journey and sort of what you had to either what prepared you for this role specifically within higher education, which I think requires at least an understanding of it and of the culture and other things. And then what have you had to sort of relearn? What's been the hardest or the most unexpected parts of the transition back?
Yeah, I'm squarely in my listing and learning phase, right? And I've loved every minute of it. But there's some muscles that I'm working again that I hadn't worked in a while, right? So, first time going back to a faculty meeting, right? First time in a classroom for more than, a visit here and there. I did teach last semester at the University of Virginia. So I had not let my teaching muscle go, but in terms of again, being in community this way, right? And thinking about student success, thinking about our faculty and how we support them. We've got incredible faculty on this campus, but again, thinking about research and thinking about tenure and thinking about how we hold each other up, thinking about service. These are all things that I'm very much aware of, but had not been spending as much time over the last few years thinking about. I would say, I'm not sure I've had a lot of surprises, but what I have had is a renewed commitment to making sure, especially coming out of this pandemic, that we honored the shared sacrifice that happened during this pandemic. And then we get ready for our next chapter. I mean, if you ask me what I'm most excited about, I think Lafayette's at an incredible inflection point because we've gone through something hard. And now we get to recommit to each other and we get to plan the future. And I think other institutions are in the same spot. So I think there's a moment here where we're all saying, what did we learn? And how do we come back after this? And how do we think about the future? And again, this is where I get excited. The DNA of the institution I'm so honored to serve right now is very entrepreneurial. It does have some risk taking. As a matter of fact, I made a comment in my inauguration speech. Obviously, this place is got some DNA around entrepreneurship and risk taking because here I am, right? And so I think there's really a sense of reimagining where we can go, and that's incredibly. Anybody who knows my time at the College Advising Corps knows I'm not one to feel like you ever stop. You always grow and you always learn and you always keep building. So I'm very excited to think about Lafayette's next chapter. And like I said, it's the whole space though. How do we think about higher ed? Lafayette's piece of that is exciting to me, but I'm also excited about, this liberal arts space. And again, not believing that you have to be gigantic to be transformative. One of the things I learned at College Advising Corps is actually, if you don't understand context, if you don't understand local, you can make some big mistakes. And I actually think all magic is local at some level. And so here we are doing the local magic on this campus.
That's beautiful. I would, so I want to turn to what has helped you get here a little bit further in terms of, I know that you are always a student, always looking for inspiration. And I am curious about what advice has been most fruitful for you that someone else gave you that you reflect upon in this journey right now.
So I've gotten this advice a lot in the last few months, transitioning from the nonprofit space back into the higher ed space. But I think I wish somebody would have given this advice when I was in the nonprofit space, because I think it's actually life advice. It's not just sector specific. And Bridget, you'll appreciate this one, especially as a college president, but I think as a nonprofit leader, and I'm sure Doug, you feel this way too in your journey. It's not about managing time. There's not any way to manage time in this job, right? It's not a job, it's a joy, it's a vocation. But there's not a lot of time management that you can do. You're on all the time. So it's not about time management, it's about energy management. I thought that was an incredibly important and wonderful piece of advice that I've gotten a couple of times, because it really is about energy management. And again, filling yourself up. And again, when I get a little bit personal here, but I think all of us, especially after and still in a pandemic, have challenged ourselves to try and find ways to fill ourselves up when we're alone so much, or when we're isolated so much, or when we're on video so much. What I have learned in this position is that, and again, this isn't going to be surprising, my love is students, right? My love is being around this educational enterprise. My love is being in those classrooms when faculty and students are interacting. And so I have to, for every X or Y meeting I have to make sure I've got time with students. I've got to make sure I have time in that classroom. And, I was, Friday night, we had a long week, but I went running at 6 o'clock in the evening over to our student center to judge a lip syncing contest, not because I have any ability to lip sync myself, and not because Lafayette's known for our lip syncing alumni, but because I got to watch a bunch of students laugh themselves and smile. And that's it. That's energy management, right? So if you ask me, hey, it's Friday, should you have been, taking your shoes off and watching TV. No, I was in the student center watching these incredible students laugh and love and have the joy. To me, that was absolutely energy management. And I have to remind myself to do that all the time.
Yeah, I like that. I'm not sure I've heard that put quite that way before, and it's a good way of thinking about it because you're right. We can't really do. There aren't that many ways we can do less and just like carve stuff out. So it's about how you focus on the right things. And um, Bridget, usually, I'm curious sort of where you see, interested in what kind of advice you've gotten in the past that has been most helpful to you. I know you've had some good mentors, and I don't know but I'm curious sort of a little bit going back to the question of sort of what has prepared you for this moment. What has been the best advice you've gotten in the past that's helped you do what you do?
And just because I know that was the slight nuance, but I would drive it further in terms of what advice do you find yourself most frequently giving to others who are interested in leadership?
Yeah, so it's the same two pieces of advice. So I will share both of them. One is my dear friend and mentor. Those of you in the higher ed space will know this name and know him well. Ed Ayers. Ed actually came for my inauguration, was the speaker. I was fortunate enough that Ed was the dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, UVA, before he went on to be the president of University of Richmond. Ed was the first one that gave me a job in higher ed after finishing up my PhD at the University of Virginia. And I can remember a difficult situation came up and Ed said to me, you've got to follow your heart. And it's just been the best advice that anybody could give me. And frankly, I use it all the time and I impart it on others all the time. But, I think sometimes I believe we're most powerful when our heads and our hearts and our hands are in alignment. But that heart piece, sometimes the academia feels a little too squishy, or what do you mean your heart? But we all know actually your heart's a huge piece of this. And whether it was the hard decision, frankly, to leave UVA and go off to do the College Advising Corps work, and he was absolutely instrumental in that decision as well. Following heart has never served me wrong. And actually leaving the College Advising Corps, which again was incredibly hard since I was the founder, I spent 15 years with amazing colleagues building that up. But again, it was just follow your heart, right? I could feel the pull, and I really fell in love with Lafayette and this incredible community. The second piece of advice, which is equally important, is actually a good friend and mentor. Some of you might know this name, Melody Hobson. Melody is now, I think she's the first woman of color to chair the Starbucks board. She's an amazing friend and mentor and ally, and she talks about being brave. And I will tell you, I have to remind myself all the time to be brave. And again, whether it's, fundraising and asking somebody to invest, whether it was at the College Advising Corps or now here, whether it's, asking a student to come on this journey with us, whether it's getting uncomfortable, which we all have to do in our own ways to kind of grow and evolve. I always have Melody in the back of my head saying, you can be bold, you can be brave. When I got to campus, she had sent me a gift, and it was that lovely Shirley Chisholm quote, if they don't give you a seat at the table, you bring a chair, right? And so she's just been a constant voice in my head about, sometimes in life, it's really hard, but we've got to be bold, we've got to be brave. That's how you make a difference.
Well, I think that is the perfect advice for us to end this show. Thank you so much, President Hurd. It's so delightful to be able to finally call you that. And for those of you at home, we hope this has been as inspiring for you as it has been for us. Doug, as always, thanks for being an excellent co-host. And for those of you at home, we will see you soon.